to Real News. I'm Aaron Mate. This weekend is the 22nd anniversary of the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin.
Yitzhak Rabin was an exceptional person and an exceptional leader.
I am very sad and very shocked for this awful and terrible crime against one of the brave leaders of Israel and the peacemakers.
As happens every year, a large memorial is held at the site of his murder in Tel Aviv, since named in his honor Rabin Square. But this year, the memorial is especially controversial. First, left-leaning groups were not allowed to set up stalls, and the word murder was not used in the invitation. This was reversed after a public outcry, but 2 of the 5 speakers at the memorial are residents of the illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. Now, the presence of the settlers is seen as an affront to Rabin's legacy because he is said to be the Israeli leader who tried to make peace and end the settlements. But that part of Rabin's legacy is worth comparing to his actual history. Well, to discuss this, I spoke earlier to Gideon Levy, an Israeli journalist with the newspaper Haaretz, and we began by talking about the culture of incitement that preceded Rabin's murder. So, Gideon, can you talk about that time and that period of incitement before Rabin's murder? I mean, one of the people who was involved in that was the current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, I must just say that today the incitement against the lefties is much worse than then. Relatively to our days, those days were relatively less dangerous and the incitement was much less. There was a bitter fight between 2 camps then, and the so-called peace camp and the so-called national camp. And the national camp had incited against anything which smelled peace. But this became much worse in our days.
How did it get worse?
I think that the left is today much more delegitimized than in those days. Today, to be a lefty is the worst curse that you can use in Israeli vocabulary. This was not the case 22 years ago. Still, people could define themselves as leftists or as peaceniks and not see it as an insult.
So my problem with the narrative around Rabin and moving the goalposts so far to the right, as it has been these days, as you described, is that it presumes that Rabin was actually trying to make a real peace with Palestinians. But in fact, if you look at his record closely, he still expanded those illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. In fact, more than his predecessor did. And on this front, I want to go to a clip from the former foreign minister of Israel, Shlomo Ben-Ami. He was on Democracy Now! In 2006, and he was talking about Rabin's real feelings about the Oslo process that many thought would lead to a Palestinian state. Ben-Ami says that Rabin did not see a Palestinian state happening.
Arafat in Oslo reached an agreement that didn't even mention the right of self-determination for the Palestinians, doesn't even mention the need of the Israelis to put an end to settlements. If the Israelis, after Oslo, continued expansion of settlements, they were violating the spirit of Oslo, not the letter of Oslo. There's nothing in the Oslo agreement that says that Israelis cannot build settlements. It was an exercise in make-believe. The Palestinians didn't even mention self-determination, so a leader like Rabin could have thought that, okay, we will have an agreement that will create something which is a state minus. This was Rabin's expression. He never thought this will end in a full-fledged Palestinian state.
So that is the former foreign minister of Israel, Shlomo Ben-Ami, and he's saying that Yitzhak Rabin, who we are all told was this man of peace, never believed that his own peace process would turn into an actual Palestinian state. Gideon Levy, I'm wondering your thoughts on this.
That's not a surprise for me. I knew Yitzhak Rabin in person. and he did change, and he created a change. But by the end of the day, he was not the man of peace that we all expected. And for sure, he was not the man of peace that he's now portrayed as. And Oslo was not a peace treaty. Let's remember that Oslo today, when we look backwards, we see that Oslo led only to a much worse reality.
Well, can you describe that reality? I mean, it includes the fact that the number of settlers in the occupied West Bank, which we all thought or were told were going to be removed, have actually doubled.
Not only this, any agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, which does not include the evacuation of any settlement, is not worth anything. Oslo didn't include this and didn't even include any freezing of the settlement project. And that's the best proof that Oslo was a trap in a way, because by the end of the day, you really can judge the real intentions of Israel only through the settlements project. And if Israel continues to build settlements, Israel says no to peace and says no to the two-state solution.
Right. And, you know, one other indication of what Oslo was about is the fact that now you have the Palestinian Authority carrying out a lot of the so-called security work that the Israeli military used to do in the occupied West Bank. And let me actually read you a quote from Rabin on that. He said, he was speaking to skeptics of the Oslo Accord at the time. And he said, the Palestinians will be better at establishing internal security than we are. They will not allow appeals to the Supreme Court and will prevent groups like the Association for Civil Rights in Israel from criticizing the conditions there. They will rule by their own methods, freeing, and this is most important, the Israeli soldiers from having to do what they will do. So that's Rabin in speaking to skeptics of the Oslo Accord in the early 1990s. Can you talk about that, Gideon Levy, how Israel has used the Palestinian Authority as essentially a collaborationist force?
That's almost the only outcome from the Oslo Accords which still remains. And this is the collaboration between the PA and Israel, a collaboration which is aimed only in one direction, to help Israel to fight what's defined as terror. It doesn't go the other way around at all, not. I mean, there is no assistance of the Israeli authorities for the Palestinians. You know, there is also something which is called security for the Palestinians, but nobody even thinks about it. So by the end of the day, the PA is on one hand the institution which enables many Palestinians VIP to gain a lot of privileges, and on the other hand, it enables Israel to have a collaborator in the West Bank, not much more than this.
So finally, Gideon, as the Rabin anniversary is marked around the world, if you could advise people how you think this date should be commemorated as we wrap.
First of all, we exaggerate in the commemoration. I mean, wouldn't Rabin be murdered? I don't think anyone would commemorate Rabin, or for sure not in such a way. But I do understand that such a murder is a trauma, is a national trauma in many ways, and should be commemorated. But, you know, it should be commemorated to try to continue from the place that Rabin stopped. Rabin didn't go very far, but there were some first steps, and Israel should continue those steps. But instead of, you know, getting back and back into nostalgia, what about going in his way? And his way totally stopped then. I'm not sure, by the way, that wouldn't he be murdered, he would have gone any further. I think he went as much as he could, and he wouldn't go any further, and therefore he's not an historical leader.
We'll leave it there. Gideon Levy, Israeli journalist with Haaretz, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on The Real News.